Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos bi-week podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name's Ben Grant, he's JB, and with the Argos off this week, it is the second of 3 bi-week pods this year. And yeah, we're kicking it back, relaxing, enjoying our bye week, but there's still a lot of stuff to talk about. We'll be going over it in today's podcast I don't think we'll keep this relaxing music in the background going the whole episode, but just to sort of start that theme of relaxation during the bye as all Argonauts, including JB and myself, are getting a chance to take it a little bit easy this week. All the stuff we're going to talk about today, the potential return of Chad Kelly, where that stands, how likely it is that he'd be inserted into the starting lineup immediately, etc. We're going to talk about a couple league-wide stories. Nathan Rourke signing with the Lions, what that means in the grand scheme of things. And there's some really interesting stuff to go into there, too. The Edmonton Elks were privately purchased, and they're going to be privately owned for the first time in decades. We'll tell you what we know on that. We have a couple thoughts on the review and command center process. Plus, we want to acknowledge PFF's team of the week for the Argos, look at some potential all-stars for the Argos at the midway point of the season. And of course, we will have our power rankings, which are much anticipated. We only do this a couple times a year. Our preseason power rankings, when you look back to them, they're always a bit of a mess. But now that we've got a feel for it, we'll tell you where we think all these teams stand. And we've got Put Me Down for 20 and our CFL picks. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, this is a great time of year to head down to Something in the Water Brewing in Liberty Village. The weather's great, blue skies, the sun is out. There is nothing better than a nice cold beer on a patio, and Something in the Water has got you set. Not only do they have an amazing selection of beer, and it's constantly changing and evolving too. Every time you go in there, you're like, hey, this is new. I haven't tried this. Why don't I give this a go? Plus, you've also got staples like Longbow Pale Ale, the beer made for Argos fans, for fans of the Double Blue. And it's Something in the Water Brewing. They've got that great patio set up. They've got the Muskoka chairs that you can just kind of sink in and watch the world go by. So you've got to check it out. If it's not for an Argos home game, and that's a great reason to be at Something in the Water too, then anytime you're down anywhere near that area, you're near Liberty Village, drop on in, grab a Something in the Water beer, grab a 6-pack of Longboat, and you won't regret it. All right, JB, let's get into things. Let's look at where we stand right now with the Chad Kelly suspension. So we are now through 9 regular season games for the Toronto Argonauts, and Chad Kelly was suspended for, at minimum, 9 regular season games. And so now people have started to look to the league for some guidance on, well, is that it? Is it 9? Is Chad Kelly coming back? Is this being extended? The league made a statement that they issued, and I just want to read just a couple excerpts from that, which may or may not provide a bit more clarity. So the league said, further to the terms and conditions of the May 7th suspension letter, the Canadian Football League has received the final assessment relating to Toronto Argonauts quarterback Chad Kelly. The CFL has now begun a thorough review process with the help of subject matter experts, which will need to be completed before it makes a determination on possible reinstatement. So when you hear that language, JB, what is your initial instinct or reaction in terms of what that's going to mean from a timeline standpoint?
Well, I understand the league wanting to be very comprehensive and to make sure that they are getting what they wanted from the suspension, and I think that's the correct thing to do. Where I get frustrated is that this does not seem to be being done in any kind of transparent fashion. I think that if you run a league, I think that's fine. Then you're in charge, but you're not like the king of France. So you should have to follow rules and regulations, and you should be transparent in timelines. I think that the fans of the league deserve to have clear things played out. The report was finished. I don't know why they weren't prepared to read and process the report immediately. or at the very least explain how much time will be required to read the report. I just feel like the open-ended nature of it feels like a somewhat arbitrary power move. I think that's not saying that you shouldn't be careful and that it's not deserving of um, study and thought and reflection and conversation before it's done. But I also feel like those are things that should be planned and explained, and that the team and the fans deserve to know, what this is, because it seems like there's a decision going to be made by the commissioner based on his evaluation of a person. It seems to be getting into murky territory from where I sit.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. And I want to highlight the timeline part of that. And I think, like, as you said, this is an important part of the process. And I'm not criticizing that part of it or these elements existing. But yeah, the timeline is big. The Argos have a bye this week. If they didn't, like, suppose the Argos were playing Thursday night, tomorrow night, or Friday night, like, would this still be the timeline? Would we still be sitting here on Wednesday afternoon wondering if he would be reinstated or not? Because to me, I think that kind of changes the language of the suspension. It's a minimum 9-game suspension. So if 9 were at all a possibility in there, and maybe it won't end up being 9, maybe it ends up being more, I don't know. But if 9 were possible, which it should be, if it's a minimum 9, there should be a way of hitting that mark, of hitting that 9. Otherwise, it would be a minimum 10 or a minimum 11. But if it's minimum 9, then there has to have at least been a possibility on the club and the players' side for it to actually be 9. And that's not the case if the league doesn't get back, I would think, today and say, yes, he has been reinstated, or no, we're extending this and it's going to go through week whatever. But I just think, yeah, that's got to be frustrating for the organization. They were already frustrated from the sense I got just in listening to what Coach Dinwiddie had to say to the media. I guess it was a week ago. He wasn't angry or shouting about it, but you could sense that he has concerns. He talked about player safety and wanting to know as soon as he could so that he can get a player out there practicing and getting themselves ready for a game, not throwing them in unprepared. And potentially risking injury. And I think that makes sense from a team standpoint of view, from a coach standpoint of view as well. So yeah, that's the frustrating part for me is timeline.
It feels like a power move by the commissioner. Like, I'm the commissioner and I'll let you know. And like, okay, like that to me feels like that's not something that's like collectively bargained. These are rules that we're following. These are punishments that are being followed. There should be a process here. It shouldn't be, well, we'll let you know when we let you know. Like that sounds like a monarchy. So, I mean, it is frustrating.
And it is possible that they've been in communication with the team and...
For sure.
Right. We know nothing. As always, we never know anything.
I think we may not know we definitely don't know what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, we don't have any clue. And so, yeah, it's possible they've reached out. It's possible that they've already been in discussions with the team. But I think, again, from a fan base point of view, fans are. I've received so many DMs throughout the course of the week saying, "Has anything happened? Is Chad reinstated? What's going on?"
Yeah,
and I don't have answers.
And I'm perfectly fine with them extending the punishment if they feel that's appropriate. I mean, I'm not arguing for rubber stamp here. What I'm arguing for is, like an efficient and due process happening at a reasonable rate. And so if they feel like, no, we're not satisfied and we're going to extend this 1 week, so be it. But much like our coming up command center conversation, I would like things to be a little clearer about what actually is happening here. So it is frustrating in that way.
Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is how different this team looks, because I've also received a lot of questions about that. We know that fans have been critical of the quarterback play. We've been critical of the quarterback play as well throughout the course of the season so far. And I think fans are having trouble gauging exactly where this Argo team sits. Like with the addition of Chad Kelly, and I think BC Lions fans are wondering this as well with the addition of Nathan Rourke, which we'll get to in our next segment. But with the addition of Chad Kelly, what does this team look like, JB? Like how much change does one player make in this case?
Well, I mean, quarterback is, it's not just one position. It's the only position that matters on a football team. I think that if Chad Kelly is able to return and get back to the level that he was playing at last regular season, I think it clearly turns the Argos into one of the two best teams in the league. That they're able to run the ball well. They stop the run really well. I mean, this team is not as good as last year's team. I don't believe. However, I do think this is a very good team. So I think if you can add in the big play and force teams to play you very differently, I think you're looking at a team that's getting special teams touchdowns, defensive touchdowns. The only glaring flaw on the team is the ability to throw passing touchdowns and the ability to throw big plays, both of which he is very good at. So I think it seems like pretty simple arithmetic.
Yeah, and there is more to it than math. There's also, dynamics in getting back acclimated to your position and to those receivers. Like there is a time element there, but I do think, like you're saying, by the time we get to the end of the season here, I think injury aside, that might be the one thing that could derail the Argos. But other than that, this team should be pretty close to a level they were at last year. But last year they had the depth piece too. Last year you could afford to lose almost anybody, probably Chad Kelly aside, and they would have been okay. This year there's not that depth, and so that is the real difference. But in terms of starters and looking at how good this team can be, I think the ceiling is extremely high on 2024.
And and the league is very. There's a lot of parity right now in the league. There really isn't anybody who is an unstoppable force. I think Montreal is very good, but when you look around the league, I think that's what is exciting as well. Is the opportunity to be the best team in the league is right there.
No question. And if part of the reason relates to quarterbacking, like just even going into like all 9 teams, take a look at all 9 teams for right now. For all 9 teams, the next game they play, for 78% of those teams, it's likely to be a different quarterback than who played the last game of the season. Think about that. Of 7 of 9 teams are going to be going to the next game, most likely with a different quarterback. You've got Ottawa, who's starting Jeremiah Masoli in place of the injured Drew Brown. You've got Cody Fajardo, who looks like he's going to be returning, and he'll be starting in place of Davis Alexander, who was already replacing Caleb Evans. And then you've got Trevor Harris likely starting, replacing Shea Patterson. McLeod Bethel-Thompson's probably going to be starting for Trey Ford due to injury. Taylor Powell has been named the starter for this week's game instead of Bo Levi Mitchell. And then Nathan Rourke sounds like he's going to start this weekend instead of Jake Dolagala, who was starting for Vernon Adams. And of course, Chad Kelly may, depending on how this goes, end up starting for Nick Arbuckle, who was starting for Cameron Dukes. And you've got so much turnaround. And like you said off the top, there is such a difference between, for most teams in most situations, starting quarterback and backup quarterback. And it's not to take anything away from Cameron Dukes and Nick Arbuckle. We said at the start of the season, if the Argos could get through the first 9 games 5-4, that would be great. And those guys have done that. They went and did the best case scenario, in our opinion, what we were thinking. This is a very realistic but optimistic target, 5-4. They've achieved that. And so for a backup quarterback, I do think that makes a difference. And you only have to look at the other teams around the league to see how backup quarterbacks have played. And maybe Montreal is the only exception to that. But like Saskatchewan was 3-0. Trevor Harris goes down, and they're 2-3-1 in the game since. And that's fine. That's Shea Patterson doing a pretty good job. But that shows you the difference in level between the guy you felt was the starter to open the season versus what you end up getting in terms of quarterback play from second or third or fourth string quarterbacks. All right, JB, let's get into the Nathan Rourke discussion. This news broke yesterday. I was stunned by it. I know Nathan Rourke has now been released by 4 different teams. I really didn't think he was given a fair go at all in Atlanta, but he was there for like a week. They throw him out there. He probably barely even knows the system at all. Has a pretty rough time with backups all around him, and he's put on waivers just after that. So, we'll save that part for another day. But Nathan Rourke still, in my mind, belongs in the NFL. There's no doubt in my mind that Nathan Rourke is a better quarterback than a large number of guys who will be NFL backups this season. No question at all in my mind about that. But we'll put that aside. He's back. I think this is great for the CFL. I think it's obviously great for the BC Lions. JB, how much of a difference does this make to the Lions go from the team that just got really blown out in back-to-back games by the Blue Bombers, by the Elks? Did they go from that to being right back in contention and maybe looking to play in the Grey Cup game that Vancouver is hosting at BC Place?
I mean, to echo your comments, I think the anti-CFL bias in the NFL, is just bonkers. The fact that Rourke was not, well, look, he right from the get-go, he got kind of shafted in Jacksonville, and then he ended up in New England, and they, that was just turned out to be bad luck. They had a million quarterbacks, and then I don't know what the Giants were doing. I mean, they think Daniel Jones is better than Nathan Rourke. I don't understand it, but I do understand coaches who look at guys from the CFL as being inferior. So, yeah, that's really disappointing. And, much like Doug Flutie, they're absolutely missing the boat.
Just before you carry on with that, just let me just add one more thing in on that. I don't. It may be a CFL bias here. I'm not sure that that's it, but it's a similar kind of thing. I think to me it sounds more like a draft pick status kind of bias.
Combined, of course. Yeah. He's undrafted, and there's no look in an organization. Drafted guys are going to play first. It very few organizations are purely a meritocracy. So you already have to overcome that. And, when you get dumped in with the 3s and 4s without any practice, I mean, of course, it's going to look terrible. So it's too bad he never found somebody who would champion him. He may still, if he tears up the CFL again. I love it. It's great for the league. He's a star. He's a Canadian star. I think I love BC's ownership. They're all in. They're spending the money to try and have him, win the championship at home. Yeah, I mean, we'll see with the power rankings. I mean, look, we talk about adding Chad Kelly. I mean, when Rourke was at his peak, he was better than Chad Kelly. I think this is an incredible signing. A league-changing signing, so I think it's great for us, and I'm glad that he's not being mistreated or disrespected down south anymore, and maybe he'll get another run at it 2 years from now.
Do you think, and I'm asking you this question having been asked this question yesterday when I was on a Saskatchewan-based show, I was asked, do you think we're maybe expecting too much out of Rourke, who has only played in 11 CFL games? Like it's a pretty small sample size. Now, I'm not even going to give you my answer first. I want you to give me your answer, and then I'll kind of come off that. But yeah, he only played 11 CFL games. Now, 10 of them were amazing. One was in the season before, and then the other 10 were in that dream season of 2022 prior to him getting injured, and then he ended up returning for the playoff run and not quite looking the same. Is it too small a sample size, or do you expect Nathan Rourke to be just like right where he left off?
I think I can't imagine that he doesn't have a chip on his shoulder, which is a dream when you have a talented player with a chip on their shoulder. I mean, you dream of that scenario. I can't imagine he doesn't want to come up here and just paint the league red. Um, and we've seen the talent, and BC knows how to use him. No, I fully expect him to come in and be absolutely dominant.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a few weeks, but I do think the fire is an important part of that. What I want to see from him and what I'll be looking for him in the first couple of games is not so much the system recognition. I think that's all going to come back to him pretty quickly. It's a system still to this point that he knows best, even with all the stops he's made along the way. A lot of that playbook jargon and verbiage is going to completely disappear from the short stops. Like, he's probably already forgotten anything he knew in Atlanta. But I think, the Jacksonville stuff might stay with him for a little bit. But that BC run was a pretty long run, and working with the same offensive coordinator in Coach McSimic, I think that's going to come back pretty quickly. But I don't know necessarily that he's going to adjust immediately to some of the offensive line issues they've had in BC. And that will be interesting to see, because Vernon Adams was a wizard to start the season. He was playing, like, if I had to vote right now for most outstanding player, it would be Vernon Adams for the first half of the season. I think he played better football than anyone else in the CFL. I think maybe Roland Milligan is the only one that's got an argument, and you never see DBs win that award. But it would be Vernon Adams. And so Adams what made him so impressive to me was that he was under fire constantly. And we saw it overwhelm him in that last game against Winnipeg when he got hurt. But he was finding ways to make guys miss, to somehow get the ball off. And Rourke is going to be asked to get rid of that football very quickly. Otherwise, he's going to take a ton of hits, because that BC line is not as good as it was when he was having his dream run in 2022. So that's my concern, I guess, is how will he adjust to having no protection?
I think so, but also I think he's going to come up and, and due respect, it's going to look different than running NFL, reps. I think the clock in his head, I think, will be so much faster than it was before he left. And I think that's going to be a terrific advantage for him.
Do you, I know Vernon Adams is injured right now. We don't know exactly how long he's going to be out. We were told initially this wasn't season ending, and yet it looked like it was going to be something that was, just based on.
Well, I think he just found out it was season ending.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Does this create a problem? Like, I know this was the situation before in 2022. They brought Vernon in when Rourke was injured, and Vernon Adams played, and then Rourke came back in when he was healthy again. It's not the same now, because now Vernon Adams, he's not just coming from being traded from another organization where things weren't going well. Things were going well. Things were going really well. And now he's been replaced. Like, forget the salary cap stuff and marketing money stuff. That's a whole other conversation too. But is that something that could be an issue? We've talked a lot about quarterbacks this season in Toronto, and if you have two, you don't have one, or whatever the saying is. I can't remember. It's definitely not that. How do you read that situation in BC when Vernon Adams gets back to full health?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think it is. I think that'll be a very tricky situation. I think that it's easier than if they had made this deal and he wasn't injured.
I know.
That would have been
and they would have. I think they would have.
I think they would have too. So I think it makes it a little easier for BC. I think the reality is they're going to, that Vernon Adams is 100% being traded in the offseason. And Vernon Adams is a professional, and I know he'll be, disappointed. But look, I think he'll be at the ready, much like the Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady of my team's past. Vernon Adams is a fan. Obviously Vernon Adams as your backup is a dream come true. I think together those guys will work to try and win the Grey Cup, and there will be a point where Vernon Adams will have to take a big role. But I think this is the last season he's in British Columbia, which will make the Edmonton Elks excited.
Yeah, I don't even know what to do with that, but that transitions into our next segment, which is the Elks being privately purchased. And so, no official statement has been made on this, but Dave Naylor's reporting is always gold, and he. I think it was Dave Naylor that broke the story yesterday that Larry Thompson, the former owner of Thompson Brothers Construction and a longtime season ticket holder of the Elks, is the individual who has purchased the team, and so they will cease to be publicly owned. I think that only leaves 2 publicly owned teams now in the CFL. I am right on that. We don't, this is an Argos-based podcast, and while this is a bye week and we're catching up on stories around the league, this isn't normally one we'd spend too much time on, but there was one area I wanted to ask you about, and that's because as soon as this happened, rumors started flying around that the new ownership might consider going back to the team's old name and abandoning Elks, and possibly even just looking at Esks as a name. You wrote such a good article years ago now. This was prior to Edmonton changing their name to Elks. You wrote a piece for us, and it was one of our most read articles in X's and Argos history. And it beautifully went through why the team needed to change the name. And with the rumors going around, there may be nothing to this at all. This may just be started from the few angry fans that are still mad about the name change. But what do you have to say when you hear something like that?
Clearly, Edmonton is still upset, right? I don't think Edmonton wanted to change the name. I think Edmonton is frustrated the name changed. It makes sense that a fan buying the team would immediately trigger conversations about bringing the name back, which I would guess would be overwhelmingly popular with the fans.
I'm not sure. I don't know about that. Like, I don't know that you're right or wrong.
There seemed to be a real drop-off in attendance when they changed the name.
Well, the team was also
not very good.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, look, I don't think Elks is a good name. I guess I have two prongs. I think, clearly Eskimo was considered a slur by those who felt that it was being used towards them, in terms of First Nation and Indigenous and people who lived in the North. They felt Eskimo was a slur. The etymology of it can sometimes be debated. What exactly does it mean? But at the end of the day, you don't have to do any research. The people who it applies to feel that it is a slur, and therefore there's no conversation from where I sit. You simply cannot have a sport team named a racial cultural slur. So I see that as a non-starter. I can't imagine that the CFL would allow it, or even some shortened version of it. I didn't like Elks. I thought that was, obviously just done to keep the double E. I thought they might have been better to go fresh. I mean, at the time, I liked Eddie's because that connects to the military history in Edmonton, and the name of their, the regiment in Edmonton. But I just see it as a non-starter. I don't even see the debate. It's a public record that the organizations of Indigenous and First Nation and those living in the North have asked for the name to be changed. So I can't imagine in 2024 that we're going to go backwards, regardless of whether it would make people happy again.
And you see, unfortunately, you see surveys that are circulating once again all around social media saying, well, First Nations groups voted on this, and these were the numbers they felt, and it's not nearly as one-sided as you might think. And again, first of all, it's been acknowledged that most of those surveys were flawed. And secondly, it doesn't matter what percentage we're talking about. Unless you're talking about, like, even if you're talking about 1% of the population, we're not. We're talking about a lot more than that. Then, like you said, I think that's a non-starter. It's not going back to that. And yeah, I would be disappointed if it went back to that. And I actually do like the name Elks. I've liked it from the beginning. I like the antlers helmet. I thought that was great. I think go with it. It was a weird name. I wasn't expecting Elks, but it's grown on me, and I've come to really like that team name. And it's a team that I wish winning had maybe coincided with that change, and maybe everyone would feel very differently. But this is where we are right now. But the Elks they're getting hot. They've won 2 in a row now. They've been one of the more exciting teams over the last couple of weeks. Maybe that if the Elks end the season on a high and they really go on a hot streak, maybe that simmers down a little bit. We'll have to see. JB, Command Center and replay review. There's a lot of talk about that this week mostly because of the Ottawa-Saskatchewan game, but it comes up in every single football game. I want to get your thought on where we can go with changing the review system, changing the Command Center process. If you haven't, 3 Down Nation's got a bunch of articles related to this. John Hodge did some really nice reporting. He was there in Ottawa for that Ottawa-Saskatchewan game and saw everything that was a mess. And he described it to me. He was at BMO Field for the last game and actually guest hosted this post-game reaction podcast the last time we were on the air. But he had some really interesting things to say about the Command Center and how the end of game, at the very least, needs to be changed, because he was up there in the press box looking to get on the elevator to come downstairs because the game had ended. All of the coaches from both teams who were in their respective booths had gotten into the elevator, and the button was pushed and off they went downstairs. And then suddenly there was an announcement that the game was back on. You've got players in the locker room. It was just such a mess. But I think it goes much further than that. I think it's more than just at the end of games. I think in general, the whole Command Center process, the nature of when they can buzz in, when they can just arbitrarily decide to review a play, has to be looked at as well. Because in Toronto's last game, there was a moment where both sidelines were furious. The Calgary Stampeders were upset, not because of the replay system, because of a call on the field. And that's fine. You can't fix that on the field. A mistake was made on the field, and I don't think there's any question about that. The question, though, is that Coach Dickinson was out of challenges, and yet it wasn't ruled a turnover, and the Command Center buzzed in anyway. And I think Coach Dinwiddie's frustration probably stemmed from the fact that, well, then why are we saving our challenges? Why are we guarding these so carefully if I can use my challenge and you, the Command Center, will bail me out if I'm a bit demonstrative on the sideline? And they catch that out of the corner of their eye in the screens of like, oh, Coach Dinwiddie's upset. We better take another look at this play. There's got to be a better system than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this goes back to my, conversations about the monarchy. It has to be codified. I mean, it has to be in the rule book. It has to be very clear what type of situations the Command Center can buzz down and which they can't. It just you're talking about. I know the sport books were not very happy, but when the sport books aren't happy, that's because they're talking about the integrity of the game. You have to know what the rules are. Like there is a rule book. It's not just the referee, lets you know some things are fine and some things aren't. Like there has to be written down what the Command Center can do and what it can't. And of course, Coach Dinwiddie is absolutely correct that they were bailed out. They didn't have a challenge. They made a big deal of it. Somebody at the Command Center noticed it, took a look at it. It's like, well, can they take a look at everything? Like, when can they buzz in and when can't they? It's very serious, when you're talking about the integrity of the game.
There was actually a tweet from a sports book saying something like CFL, can we get our rules together? The Command Center is not above reproach. Like, just because they work for the CFL doesn't mean that people should then believe that
everything's fine. Like, you need to be transparent. You need to be able to explain why you called down and why you didn't. You also answer to somebody. And that, I mean, that Saskatchewan Ottawa game, it was preposterous. To how are fans supposed to celebrate the end of a game? Like, do we wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Does the second commercial break before we know that it's locked in? Never mind the fact that the call was wrong, and I just thought that was an outrageous, call where a guy got clipped and went, helicoptering in. Um, yeah, I mean, it has to be codified. It has to be on what calls, because exactly as coach said, it was not ruled a turnover on the field. So therefore, that should not trigger a command center review, unless like the command center is just like Zeus, and sometimes Zeus throws a thunderbolt and sometimes they don't. Which of course is no way to run a professional football league.
Yeah, there needs to be more clarity on that, and something you've said for a long time. The comment about getting the audio, the conversations. I love that. Still one of my favorite parts of the review process. This isn't related to when the command centers buzz in, which again, I agree with you. I think that needs to be written down. On these types of plays, the command center will automatically take a look, and if they see something, will buzz in, but on no other play will they. I think that's where we're kind of getting to. But you've talked about just the being able to hear and having more. It goes back to transparency. We've talked about that a few times today. Why can't we hear the explanation so that we're not left in the dark? Because on those plays, I know you felt that was incorrectly applied. I do too, by the spirit of the rule. But actually, if you look at the rule book, the command center gets pretty much every one of these right. But sometimes there's a degree of logic that needs to be applied. Going back to the fumble in Montreal, or sorry, in Hamilton in the Montreal game, where there was a fumble that was clearly only could have possibly been recovered by Montreal, but by the letter of the law, it wasn't immediately, and so that wasn't ruled a recovered fumble. Same thing with this one, a guy who had absolutely no ability to control where his flying body landed because he was cut at the line of scrimmage, rolls into the quarterback's legs. Well, the rule's pretty clear that is a penalty, but those are things that, again, you can apply some common sense surely to, or maybe that's a rule that needs to be looked at. But to me, the biggest thing is, and I think the thing that would make fans happiest and coaches happiest, is if there were consistency across the board and they knew it was written down, these plays will be looked at, these plays never will.
You just can't have the command center deciding, oh, that was a bad call, better weigh in. Like, that's just way too arbitrary. And what about all the other bad calls? Like, referees are going to miss things. Like, either, like, if it's not a turnover and it's not a scoring play, I just don't understand why the command center is weighing in.
In its current system, the command center is encouraging coaches and teams to be demonstrative on the bench. Like, that's what this system rewards, where you almost like, where I wouldn't even be surprised to see coaches initiate like code words on the sideline, where that's almost like your next challenge flag. You're out of challenges. We have this code word that gets spread around, and suddenly everyone throws their arms in the air and starts, taking a few steps onto the field, looking around in disbelief, even if they don't even know what the call was, because that will get the command center to take another look at something. And it shouldn't be like that. That's a joke. It's a mockery of the sport and the system. It can't be a system where you're pandering to the TV screens in hopes that the command center will notice your disappointment and take a better look at a play. That can't be the way this runs.
Right.
JB, the PFF Team of the Week included a few different Argos, Kadeem Carey among them, as well as Peter Nicastro, Deshaun Amos, and Janarian Grant, of course. Janarian Grant with the epic punt return touchdown, his fourth return touchdown of the season. No surprise there, but those four guys, and looking at their performance, I think that maybe transitions us nicely into looking at who are the Argos who are in the all-star conversation picture at the moment, because we're halfway through the season now. We are a little bit, actually, we're 2 games more than halfway through the season from a league standpoint, but we are exactly at the halfway point in terms of the Argos having played their 9 games and with 9 remaining. I think there are a number of Argos who need to be considered for All-Stars at this point. I want to put forward a few names, and maybe we can talk about where those guys stand and how we feel about them. So I'm going to suggest Dejan Allen, Ryan Hunter need to be looked at very carefully on the offensive line. I think Kadeem Carey definitely needs a close look. It's certainly for East All-Star, if not All-Star overall. Jake Serezna on the D-line. I think Jared Brakeman, were he not injured, would probably be getting a closer look, but maybe that opens, we don't know when he's going to be able to return. He may not have enough games to be considered, but his level of play certainly was there. Wynton McManus, I think we can talk about. Deshaun Amos, I think, has been having a fantastic year that isn't backed up by stats, but it's backed up by the eye test. And that's a guy that I will lobby for and argue for, because from what I've seen from him in games and on film, the reason he doesn't have stats is because he's doing his job extremely well. And when people do go in his direction, it's going back the other way. So he's another guy. And Royce Metier, I think, probably has shown to be the best safety in the league so far this year. So those are guys that off the bat that I think of. And then there's special teams contributors, Janarian Grant, obviously. And I think he will be, even if he were injured for the rest of the season. I think he's done enough in 9 games to already be there. But I think some of the other special teams contributors, I think Jack Cassar has a real shot this year at being an all-star based on his special teams tackling and his special teams play. So those are all guys that I want to throw into the conversation. Am I missing anyone, or is there one that you want to kind of talk about a little bit and maybe make a case for why they should be an all-star, or at least in consideration right now?
No, I mean, that's a pretty comprehensive list of the Argos to start. Yeah, I think that there's nobody jumping out for like MVP in the way that maybe in years past we've had, like where we felt like McManus or Pickett was clearly the best defensive player in the East. But definitely, I think all of those players you mentioned are in the All-Star conversation, and just simply need to continue in the second half. I think Carey has been fantastic. McManus is always incredible. Metier has played superbly, and Serezna has been everything you could hope for. The guy is Thor. I mean, the guy is a superhero.
That name is taken, by the way.
What's that?
The name Thor is taken for CFL nicknames.
No, I understand, but he has been he's been terrific. So there hasn't been one standout player for the Argos, I don't think, in the first half, but they have at least 6 players who are worthy of all-star consideration.
And I think that, again, without injury, Wynton McManus missed a couple of games. He's playing. I think he would be a guy that you talk about. I don't know if you talk about him more than Roland Milligan in Saskatchewan, just because of the sheer number of interceptions and big plays that he's made. But I do think he would be there in the East conversation defensively, if not for the fact that he's now missed a couple of games and probably will miss the next few as well. But his level of play was as high, if not higher, than Jared Brinkman, who I thought was playing as well as any D lineman in the league before his injury. So we'll see when they return and if they're able to regain that form, and that may play into things as well. But yeah, Janarian Grant, I think for sure I think he's the one guy you can say is a lock. I think Allen and Hunter have a really good chance because I think they're known, and that helps a guy that's not necessarily making their first all-star campaign. Those guys have been talked about for a few seasons now. Dejan Allen recognized for his line play last year. So no one's ignoring him anymore. So I think those guys will definitely be in it. And then guys with stats, like where it's easy to back up. Kadeem Carey, his stats will make the argument for him. And you look at the difference between he and Brady Oliveira right now. The touchdowns are the biggest difference. Oliveira has more rushing yards per game. I think they're both tied at 611 for the league lead, but I think it's 6-0 in terms of touchdowns for Carey over Oliveira. So there is a difference there as well. So I think those guys are going to be in the conversation. Could someone emerge? Is it possible for anyone in 9 games to emerge and be in the conversation for the back half of the season? It is, but I'm not sure anyone jumps out immediately to me. Rimalotti maybe could go on a tear and be talked about. Fraser Sopik's been playing really well, but I don't think you're going to necessarily see that. Robbie Smith, same thing, but I don't feel like I just don't think there's a gap there because there are other players at that position that have been playing extremely well all season long. And I think it would be an almost impossible feat for the Argos receivers at this point as well. So I think those are the guys we're looking at down these last 9 games to crack the All-Star list. All right, JB, it's time for our power rankings. We constantly embarrass ourselves by doing preseason power. I don't even know why we do preseason power rankings anymore because they're always they're in shambles after like 2 weeks. But our midseason rankings, we've had a chance to see it now. My rankings today is going to be, it's my eye test and it's going for, this is not really based on the standings of where teams are now. It's how dangerous I see these teams going down the stretch. So these are, in other words, it's almost like my own personal Grey Cup odds, I guess, would be how my power rankings are shaped. How are you looking at this midseason power ranking?
Exactly. I'm looking at what teams have done, their strengths and weaknesses, and then moving forward, who do I think will be the hardest team to beat in the playoffs in the second half? So like that. I mean, you don't need a power ranking that tells you when the 9. You can just look at the standings. It's a power ranking, so it is based on what I've seen. But looking at this and moving forward, where do I see these teams matching up? And spoiler alert, Hamilton is not going to look good.
We may be talking about them very soon because we're going to start with 9. And I'll go first, JB. Hamilton Tiger Cats are my 9. The team's a mess right now. I feel who I feel really bad for is Bo Levi Mitchell, who I think has actually had a really good season. And he's now no longer the starting quarterback, really no fault of his own. But they just needed a change. They needed a spark. And so Taylor Powell's going to take the ball from Bo Levi Mitchell going forward, or at least in the short term. But other than that, the win over the Toronto Argonauts, which isn't it always somehow, they have shown very little, and it seems to be getting worse in some ways too. So Hamilton is my 9. Who is your 9, JB?
Hamilton. Now, in fairness to Hamilton, it was a competition with Edmonton, but I just think for Hamilton, it's just a team that. I don't know why they're not that good. I do think another coaching change is probably coming, to be honest. I think they have the parts to be better. They're a very frustrating team to try and figure out because they do a number of things pretty well, but except win. So I do think a coaching change is coming in the offseason. That would be my prediction because this is not a bad roster. It needs some work, but they just don't have it. They don't have what it takes to, other than having a bunch of ex-Argos who get really fired up to beat the Argos.
And so number 8, is that where you're putting the Elks?
Yeah, I have Edmonton there. I think with the new owner, there's going to be a bounce for sure. I think they've got some energy going now with the new quarterback. However, they are still not a very good football team. Oakman aside, I think that that's a team that needs to be refigured out and rebuilt. So I have Edmonton 8.
I don't have Edmonton 8. I actually have, and this is maybe my first controversial pick, I have Calgary 8. And the reason for that is I can't, partly I want to punish Calgary for making them so hard to predict every year. I feel that way about Ottawa too. But I don't see room for growth the way that I do with some other teams. I think Edmonton is going to keep getting better throughout the course of this year. I think a lot of teams that are getting injured guys back are going to continue to get better. And guys like Toronto, for example, is going to continue to get better. I don't see that with Calgary. I don't know that I see improvement. And right now they're sitting there at 4-5. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised to see them go on a negative slide. I wouldn't be surprised to see them just kind of hover around 500. I don't see potential for them down the road, and they don't at all scare me as a potential playoff team either. It's hard to play in Calgary, and they haven't lost a game at home, but they've lost 5 on the road, and
I know
and by a lot.
that has
So
to change.
yeah, it just, you can't, like, a team that cannot win. They're not, like, Calgary's not hosting playoff games. And so a team that can't win on the road doesn't scare me at all. So I put them right to the bottom there. There's some players I love on that roster, but as a team, they just don't have it this year. So they are my 8. And and if I can snake it and continue, I've got Edmonton at 7. But I think there's potential there for them to get hot. If Trey Ford had, he's injured now, and we'll see what his status is going forward. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, I love, but I do think Ford was the needed spark that kind of ignited them, and they're on a 2-game winning streak now. I don't know. I just don't have a lot of long-term faith yet. The 2 games is great, but I'm in a bit more wait and see on them. I haven't seen enough for them yet, so that's why they are my 7.
Yeah, and like, if we were to tier within the power, like, there 7, 8, 9 is a tier. I have Calgary at 7. So I think you put that tier, that's a non-playoff tier. I mean, you can flip them and move them around whatever way you like. Those 3 teams are not making the playoffs.
And as we get to the next tier, this is the next surprise for me. So we get to number 6 now. And as well as they've played, and as wrong as they've proved me week in and week out, I still refuse to accept that the Ottawa Redblacks are as good as their record. They're sitting there at 5-2-1. They're second place in the East, and I don't see it. I've watched, I haven't missed a CFL game in like over a decade, but I watch their games closely because they mystify me. I don't understand how they keep winning, and I still don't get it. And so for me, I know they keep winning games. I want to see the test that they had for me was when they went into Montreal, and I wanted to see how they did there against a really good Alouettes team, and they just got annihilated in that game. And to me, that exposed what Ottawa is. And they've had a few lucky breaks too. Like they played Edmonton twice for 2 of those wins. Their tie, they arguably should have lost to the Rough Riders, and they've caught some other teams at the right time when they were reeling. So I'm anxious to see how the second half of the season goes for the Redblacks. I don't think it's going to go particularly well, and I think some of that difficulty might start this week. So we'll see. We'll keep a track on Ottawa throughout the second half of the season. But I have them at 6, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them fall even further than that. Who is your 6, JB?
I have them at 6. I like them at 6. I think they have a good. I see them as having a real shot at making the playoffs. I do agree with your disbelief. They don't score touchdowns. Now we'll see if Mazzoli gives them a little gas in that area. I think I remember last year thinking midseason Mazzoli was going to. In fact, I feel like at the power rankings, Mazzoli was taking over, and then he blew his leg out like 25 minutes into the game. So here I am again saying I think Ottawa, if Mazzoli can be good, they have a very good defense. They have very good special teams. They don't take penalties. They're very well coached. They are absolutely smoke and mirroring what's happening here. I watch their games. I hate their games. I hate their stadium. I hate that the TV is black and white when I'm watching in Ottawa. I just cannot get behind them in any way to be a Grey Cup contender. But I do have them at 6. I do have them at a tier above. I think that I think it's a tribute to the coaching. I think the coaching staff has done an incredible job with the roster. Because there's no reason for Ottawa to be better than Hamilton.
Who's your number 5, JB?
Number 5, unfortunately, the love affair is dimming a little. I have Saskatchewan at number 5. I still think they're really dangerous, depending on what Harris is able to do. They have that terrific defense. I would not want to play them in a playoff game. But they also hide Ottawa in Ottawa. They have some bad losses. They are a little unpredictable for me to put to putt at the more elite level. I like them. We'll see. We'll see if Trevor Harris puts them into another gear. And the gear I thought they had at the beginning. But I have them sort of dangerous. I would rank them as dangerous, but below the top four.
Yeah, I think all my top five I view as dangerous. I think anyone in the top five can win the Grey Cup. I
Yeah,
don't,
100%.
and I don't feel that about my bottom four. Whereas I think if you're in the top five, you got a shot, and largely it means because you've got a quarterback. And Trevor Harris, I do think, has got. I actually have Saskatchewan a place higher than that. I've got Winnipeg in my 5 spot, only because they've got more work to do, and I don't think it's necessarily going to get easy for them right away. Like, looking at their schedule and the way things balance out for the rest of the year, I think Winnipeg is going to have a tough time. They've really struggled to overcome their offensive line issues, and that might be something Saskatchewan will be going through going forward, even though I know they're getting Trevor Harris back and things are looking up for them. We'll see. I want to see a little bit more from both those teams, but I've got Winnipeg as my 5, and I've got Saskatchewan as my 4, who I actually think, they've been struggling for a few weeks now. I expect them to actually start producing again once Trevor Harris gets in there, but it makes me nervous knowing that offensive line is so banged up. They've lost so many guys from that offensive line. It feels like every week there's someone new that's on the 6 game, and so I worry about Trevor Harris in that pocket on that team, and so that's why I'm hesitant to put them any higher than that. But I do have them at 4, which I think is a pretty good spot. JB, who is your 4?
Right. So I think we're very close to each other. My 4 is Winnipeg.
Okay. Yeah, we barely missed step here.
I think they're the sleeping giant. I think that they still, never doubt the heart of a champion. I think that their defense is fantastic. They're 9th in touchdowns. I just don't believe that's going to continue. They're 0-4 on the road. I just think that balances out a little bit. That they are a good rushing team. I know they don't have somebody coming in the way Toronto does, but I just would not want any part of a Winnipeg playoff game. They're still really elite in so many important categories, despite their terrible record. I think they start putting wins together. They know how to win. They're going to feel like the league is disrespecting them. I expect them to be a really good team in the second half.
And who is your number 3?
Number 3, I have Toronto. Much like Winnipeg, they do things really well, except for passing the ball. But the difference being that they have a solution coming in, hopefully. Toronto scores touchdowns in all 3 phases. Toronto's very good at rushing the ball. They're very good at stopping the rush. I mean, that, not to get too old school, but those are statistics you look at to see whether your team has the grit to win a playoff game. And Toronto does both really well. If they can improve their ability to pass, Toronto's 5-4 and they're 9th in offense. Like, even if you get that to 5th, I think that's a very good team. Because they are so well balanced. I really like Toronto.
Here's how I look at the 2-3 split, because I've got BC in 3.
Yeah, look, that's fair.
And the reason why, like, both teams are 5-4. Both teams have a quarterback they expect to be coming in to really improve things. But you look at what is around Nathan Rourke versus what is around Chad Kelly, and I think there's some differences there. Like, BC's receiving core is bananas. They're amazing, but offensive line play is the second most important position after quarterback play in any football. And Toronto's offensive line is excellent, and they've also got the league's best rushing attack. They are rushing for more yards than any other team in the league. They've got Kadeem Carey, who is tied for the league lead in rushing yards and has the league among running backs and touchdowns. And so to have all that and then add in last year's MOP throwing the football to not only Coxie and Daniels, who he's going to be able to re-engage, guys that the other quarterbacks weren't able to re-engage or engage. Makai Polk is really turning into something. I can't wait to see what he adds to the picture when he's got the ability to extend his route tree more than just those quick throws and quick outs and stuff that he's been getting. So I think they've got more in terms of potential expansion than BC does, because BC has offensive line problems. BC can't really run the football. And yeah, they haven't been able to pass protect one bit. And I think Toronto's defense is better than BC's. And I think Toronto's special teams is better than BC's. So that's why I've got BC 3 and I've got Toronto number 2. Who is your number 2, JB?
I agree with the majority of that. I think Toronto's underlying team is stronger than BC. I just don't know necessarily. I feel the Rourke transition is going to be smoother than the Kelly return. I'm not sure how the Kelly return is going to go. We talked about it before all of it happened. That I wasn't, I don't think it's going to, I'm not sure it's going to be plug and play. And, we'll see how wrong I am. But I do think Rourke is going to be plug and play. And if he is, then, that's why I have BC at 2, because, he's going to become an unstoppable force.
And so do you have...
Which I think will improve, a lot of their aspects.
So you've got BC at 2, so that means Montreal is your 1, just like it's mine.
Yeah,
what do you have
I don't
to say
see how
about,
you don't.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't, because the thing to me is they have made good teams look terrible. Like, they have come in to just completely dismantle very good football teams, and they've done it without Cody Fajardo in a couple games too. Like, other teams, when they've lost their starting quarterback, suddenly now they look a little bit more normal. Montreal not only had to start their second quarter, they started their third quarterback a couple times, and everything seemed okay. Even when the quarterbacks weren't playing at anywhere near a level that Cody Fajardo could play at, they still found a way to win football games. And their only losses to Toronto, the game where Cody Fajardo went down and Toronto had a special teams touchdown, they had a defensive touchdown, and Toronto's found a way to win football games that way. But other than that one game, they have been by far the better team in every matchup, and so you got to give it to them right now.
Agreed. I mean, this is more for me. Like, I don't think Montreal is my favorite to win the Grey Cup, so I guess I kind of cheated. This is more a tribute to how well they've played the first half of the season. I think that, like, honor is due. They've been very well coached and they performed really well. Like, they have some injury issues. I think they have. I don't love their running game, but I think they've earned to be number 1. But I'm not sure they're my favorite to win the Grey Cup. At 100% healthy, yes, but I'm not sure what's going on there right now with their wide receivers.
Well, part of why I have them there is they've got a 3-game lead on everybody else in the East. They're already at 8 wins. Ottawa and Toronto sitting there at 5 wins, and there's only 9 games left. And so, to me, they can rest guys down the stretch. They're probably going to have the luxury of being able to clinch the East, most likely, unless things go sideways for them. They should be able to clinch with a few weeks remaining and get a bye. And so they should be able to host the East final, only need 1 game to win, and being fresh and ready and maybe having a few weeks rest before going into that one. So I think they've got every advantage right now.
They do. I love Toronto's desire to ruin Montreal's season.
I know.
I think that's real. Montreal knows it's real. The Montreal fans know it is real, and the Argos are coming to ruin your season, Montreal. So keep that in mind in October.
Our power rankings now done. Let's get into our CFL picks and our next segment, which is Put Me Down for 20. We both had good weeks last week, but a disclaimer, you should never, ever listen to our betting advice. We're just betting fictional golden fleeces here. Only ever bet what you would be happy to lose as a cost of entertainment, and do not take anything we say remotely seriously. We both started with 200 golden fleeces, and we are both in the black here. You have 227 and a little bit golden fleeces. I have 234 and a half golden fleeces. You won a parlay last week, which you never do. So that was big with the Toronto win plus over a combo. Where are we going this week, JB? Where are you risking your golden fleeces as you look to continue making a profit in this fictional betting game?
Well, I know it's a little counter to my power rankings, but I have Hamilton I have Hamilton winning. Now, look, I consider my bottom three interchangeable, so I guess that's how I would defend it. But Hamilton at home, plus 114 on the money line. I'm a money line juice fan. Give me home dogs, like in big bold letters. Home dogs. I am a home dog sucker.
And where are your other 10 golden fleeces going?
I'm all in. I'm all in on the Mazzoli era. I got him 300 yards, plus 290. Ottawa, I still don't think much of you, but I'm in on Mazzoli, and let's do this. Let's try and get through the whole game, and I think he's ready to put up some big numbers, and I love that. I love that against Calgary.
For my fleeces, I'm going to put 10 on Saskatchewan on the money line. I just like them at home. Again, it's a home dog thing. It's plus 100. It's even money, but I do like that. I like that for them as much as I just pump Montreal's tires a little bit there. I think this game is so much more important to Saskatchewan. They need to win this game. Montreal has bought themselves a little bit of leisure, and they don't necessarily have to just empty the tank every time they step on the field. Saskatchewan is in the middle of things. They just got tougher in the West too, because not only is Winnipeg starting to get better, BC just found a quarterback. Edmonton's starting to get hot. Like they're in a fight now, and they got to win this game. So I like Saskatchewan on the money line. And my other 10 golden fleeces, I'm putting on a parlay here. I've got Winnipeg to win in BC and the over at the same time. I just think Winnipeg is going to look to spoil the party in Vancouver, and we've seen them do it before. So that parlay pays plus 281. Those are my bets for this week. Let's get into our CFL picks. Last week you were 3-0-1, JB.
No,
I was
don't even talk to me about that 0-1.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have ties on our books for the rest of the season, so that's how it goes. So you stand right now at 22-17-1. I'm 25-14-1. Here are the plays this week. So Ottawa is at Calgary. I'm taking the Stampeders. I can't even explain why, other than Calgary wins at home and loses on the road, and I don't think Ottawa is good as their record. So who do you have, Calgary or Ottawa?
Despite my Mazzoli hope, I am taking Calgary. I think it's simple as that. Calgary is really good at home, and home field is a real thing in the CFL. I know it's disappeared in a lot of leagues, but for some reason not in the CFL.
Montreal at Saskatchewan. I'm taking the Green Riders. Where are you going?
You know what? I need to make some moves here, and I think this is a safe move. I like Montreal. I like Montreal. This is a chance for me to make a game on you. I just made them number one in my power ranking. How one would question a number one power ranked team losing, but not here. Not from this person.
Edmonton at Hamilton. I have the Elks winning this one.
All right.
Yeah, this could be. I think they're playing really well right now. I think they've got confidence, and I think Hamilton is just they're just done. So I see Edmonton winning this one. Are you sticking with your Tiger Cats?
Yep. Saturday night in Hamilton, the place will be buzzing.
Will it?
And I think they know this is a team they can beat. And I think that that's going to be enough for Hamilton to get it done.
And last up, Winnipeg at BC. I'm taking the upset. I'm taking the Blue Bombers. They're playing good defensive football right now, and may get Kenny Lawler back this week. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But if he does return, that might boost the Blue Bombers a little bit as Collaros gets another target.
I love that pick.
You're going Lions?
I love the Lions. I think that they were embarrassed by Winnipeg. I think Rourke comes back. I mean, they blow the roof off that stadium. I love, as they would say, I love the Lions big.
Well, Argos fans, I certainly hope you enjoy the bye week. 4 games on the slate this week. All should be pretty close ones, and no stress on you. You can sit back and relax and watch all the action. We'll come back to you next week, midweek, as we get you set for the Argos next game, and hopefully we'll know by then what the Chad Kelly status is, as Toronto has a Thursday night game next week with Saskatchewan in town. The first time they've been at BMO Field, I think, since the pandemic. I'll have to look up on that, but I think it's the 2 games in the East Coast, the shortened season where they only played in Saskatchewan, and this will be their first meeting here this year. So I think it's their first visit since 2019.
I'm excited. It's my return. My return to the big city.
And it's the CNE game. It is like the circus is in town, like literally and figuratively. The circus will be in town, Saskatchewan at Toronto in a week's time. Well, that would just about do it for us on this bi-week episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.